Hello guys, how are you doing? So it's late night. I'm not really prepared to record anything, but I feel like doing a bit of a talking head video. So in this video, I want to talk about what was my first programming language, right? So first of all, I want to thank you for all the students. They know me from Udemy. I have over 200,000 students, which I feel really grateful. So I'm sure a lot of you may have this question, like what was my first programming language, how I got into programming and all that, right? So talking about the first programming language, it was PHP. It was back in around 2015. So back then I didn't know how to code. I didn't know anything about coding. I was learning graphic design. I did some really cool projects using Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator, and then I thought about applying for a job, right? So I needed a website so that I could display, put all my projects, and then I could put the website in my resume so that people could just click and have a look at all my projects. Because as a graphic designer, when you have lots of projects, it doesn't really make sense to print them and put in your resume or something like that. That doesn't make sense, right? So obviously you needed to have it online. Either it's in some kind of a networking site, some kind of a something like Behance, some platform, social platform where you can display, or you need to have your website. So that's how I got into building websites. So I needed to build to display my to show off my projects. And then first obviously I came across with WordPress, and then WordPress was great. I mean, I tried some free not free, I did try free as well, and then some paid premium themes, and they were incredible. The top 10 premium themes, they come with so many templates. You can do so much more. It's just unreal. You feel like you really you have the power to do anything with those themes. They're incredible. Now the problem is, obviously they're great, but you always want to make them your own, right? You want things to be certain way, the way you want. For example, instead of uploading one image, maybe you want to upload multiple images. Maybe you want it to look different. Maybe you don't want lots of features, but only the few features that you needed, things like that. I mean, you come across all those things, right? So that's a problem with WordPress, especially the premium themes. They let you do so much more, but at the same time, it's really hard to customize. So that's when I got interested into coding, because I realized that if you want to make some changes, then you need to be able to customize the code, right? So back then PHP was quite popular. Obviously JavaScript was taking over even in the server side, but PHP was very popular back then. And WordPress was using PHP, so obviously that was obvious choice for anyone to go to a programming language that's PHP, and it was easy. It was easy to get started, and the PHP was good. The problem with me, I would say, is that I didn't spend a lot of time learning the basics. When you, especially in my case, I don't know if it is the same with everyone, but when I was trying to learn programming, I didn't really like to spend a lot of time in the basics. I mean, obviously I did go through the basics, variables, objects, functions, all that I went through. You know how I did. So learn, I don't exactly remember where I actually learned. I mean, I learned from YouTube videos, lots of YouTube videos. Some books also I tried back then, but they were not really practical. Later on, I found some books, they were really good. For example, PHP 7, that book was really good. That introduced me to PHP, object-oriented programming. That was a really good book. So if you're interested, you should try that as well. PHP 7. So yeah, most of them were from YouTube videos, and what I did is, for example, he would show us how to create variables, how to create functions, objects, a couple of lines of code. And what I did is I wrote them right in my text editor, obviously, and then I printed as well. So I printed, and then back then, obviously, I wasn't doing web development. That wasn't my job. I was working in the hospitality industry. It's a different industry. And whenever I got time, whenever I had a free time, I would just take out the printout and have a look, just to remind myself that, So I had that much dedication, really. And I think everyone, if you're learning to code, if you want to get into programming, you need to have that kind of enthusiasm, that kind of drive to learn. It's not something that you have to force yourself. It should come from within yourself. Back then I didn't know I would be making any money doing coding. I didn't know I would even make a career in coding. I didn't know, and I really didn't have any hope, to be honest, really. If I could make $500 building a website, that would be the greatest achievement for me back then. All right, so money was never the goal. And this thing I want to tell you, if you're learning to code because there's a lot of money, you get good salary, blah blah, the money is the main attraction, then please don't. You will get disappointed. Obviously, you will make a lot of money as a good developer, but if you don't enjoy coding, if you don't enjoy creating something out of nothing, if you don't enjoy problem solving, if you don't enjoy thinking, planning, and enjoying that quiet, silent time so that you can completely focus into your code, into your project, and code. If that's not for you, then if you are learning it just for the money, don't do it, because you won't be able to continue for long, right? So you have to really feel it from inside. So yeah, that's I even printed the code, during my learning days, and then used to have a look at them whenever I had a free time. I even had a mobile app. There was I forgot the name, Solo Learn or something. Yeah, and you could do some quick quiz on the phone. When I was going somewhere by train, a 1 hour long journey, I would just open that app and then start going through those questions. That you need to have that sort of the desire to learn to code. So yeah, that's how I so my PHP was the first language. Unfortunately, even though I even printed and studied, I didn't really spend a lot of time learning the basics really well. Now when I think about that now, maybe I did try my best, but because I didn't come from computer science background, and obviously I wanted to build something as soon as possible. I wanted to build a website. I wanted to build something that I can see on the browser and maybe show it to other people, and build something useful, maybe like a login and registration system, so that I can do something. So I was kind of not desperate, but I was more excited to build project, something real, than going through the basics. Because when you're going through the basics, you learn new stuff, but you don't really build something that you can show it to your friends, or you can use in real world, unless you have a real project. So I was more focused to build something like that, because that would excite me. So I went to a framework, and back then Laravel was just so hot. It's very popular. It still is. It still is a great framework. So I didn't spend a lot of time learning PHP, or maybe I did, but because coding was completely new for me and I had no computer science background, maybe that wasn't good enough, let's put it that way. So I would jump into Laravel framework, and then it was great, but obviously that's a huge framework. Just to set up your local environment, installing Composer, installing Laravel, just those things were just extremely difficult, so difficult. So when I was I remember when I was able to install Laravel and create a new project using that command Laravel new your blog or something like that, that was, I felt like that was the biggest achievement. And then you create a route, return use a controller, and controller will give some data to your view, and then you just get something from the database, display in your template. Great time. It's really exciting. So that's how I got into PHP, because I needed to learn how to build website that I can customize the code, write code from scratch. WordPress wasn't the ultimate solution, so I got into coding. And back then the go-to solution was PHP. One of the the most used programming language. WordPress was using it, and I was more focused. I was a person, and still a person, more focused in the backend and then the programmability than the visual appearance in the front end. And I absolutely like good-looking websites, but at the same time, I didn't really like to spend a lot of time writing CSS and making it nice. Instead, I like to focus more on the functionality, more on the backend side. That's just naturally that person. Alright, so I got into PHP. That was my first programming language to learn about variables, objects, functions, all that. But maybe I could have spent a bit more time, but I didn't. Instead, I jumped into the framework, and quickly I could build great projects. Okay, and I built a great project. I even created a Udemy course. I will talk about how I decided to teach and all that in later videos. But yeah, very quickly, within a year, I got into Laravel framework, got myself used to it, and then even decided to create a course, and it was very popular back then. All right, so the bottom line is PHP was my first programming language, and I tell you one thing honestly, I still feel like I need to go back to PHP, learn the basics really well, because after that, after building few projects with Laravel, I got into JavaScript. I got into JavaScript really well because I wanted to learn that really well, and the main reason was to get into front-end, building apps with React. But during that time, I learned JavaScript really well, and then I feel like I could have done the same with PHP. All right, so maybe one day, I will start going through some really good books to go through all the basics of PHP, or maybe go through the documentation and all that. Either way, I want to spend some more time, give some more time to PHP, because it's my first programming language. And you always, I don't know if it is because it was the first, I always feel like I didn't give enough to PHP. And it's a great language. It's with the new version, PHP 8. I think it's even 9 out already. PHP 8, it's extremely fast. The performance is absolutely amazing with new versions of PHP, and it is one of the best server-side languages. You can just mix them up with HTML. Obviously, that's not recommended way, but serve HTML pages, mix them up, and just do some calculation, do some programming in between. It's really cool. And there are so many things that makes it makes PHP as if it is built for web development. And no wonder the biggest e-commerce application they use it, because it is really flexible, especially when you combine the power of object-oriented programming with PHP. Just there's no limit. All right, so let's not make this video too long. So yeah, I got into programming, I got into PHP, then tried Laravel framework. It was great, but later I got into JavaScript, and then slowly almost left Laravel, because even though it's a great framework, pretty much everything you have to learn specifically for that framework, not just for the PHP as a programming language, but especially for the framework. And every time the new version comes, they update, and you go and go through that. So you never come out of that the circle, that circle that the Laravel has created. You can never come out of that, because there's so much more that you have to invest all your time, and it's just for that framework. You cannot use that knowledge anywhere else. So that's what got me into, that's what encouraged me to try something else. And then when I got into NODEJS, the freedom you get to build your server, and it's incredible. Unlike Laravel, where everything is told to you by the framework, like you do this, you do that, you do that. No, you don't do this, and it's so controlling. But with NODEJS, it's just you're free. However you want to go ahead, however you want to build, however you want to structure your application. So it was great. All right, so yeah, if you haven't watched my previous video, I talked about are you too old to learn coding? What is you started to program, and how I started. So I shared my life story. Maybe check that out as well. And in this video, we talked about my first programming language. So in the next video, I think this will be a bit more interesting. This one I will be doing next one maybe in few days. The title is gonna be this is, by the way, this asked by one of my students. He asked me, do you follow any YouTubers like Traverse Media, New Boston, Net Ninja, etc.? Okay, so I will talk about that in the next video. Stay tuned. All right, I will see you in the next video. Thank you.